Hello, and welcome back to those who are now joining us as well for Art in Hong Kong, People, Place and Practice. This is now the second segment for the symposium, and the next topic is going to be about understanding art criticism and curation, something that is still widely misunderstood in Hong Kong. For this, I'm delighted to introduce Yeung, founder of Soundpocket, promoting sound as art and its research in Hong Kong. Over to you, Yeung.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us, CoBo, and also Sovereign Art Foundation. We have a great panel today, but we have only 1 hour. This is what we're going to do. We had a discussion last week about how we could make the best of this hour. So it's a big topic, art criticism and curating. So we're going to shift the emphasis a little bit more to art criticism, but then curating will come in where necessary, where it's needed. I mean, our panelists easily, their professional experiences are in both fields, so they will arise. And we are here not to make any consensus. We're not here to give any single account of either art criticism or curating. We're just here to have a productive conversation, maybe fight a little bit and struggle with the difficult issues. So we have talked about how we might divide this hour into like roughly 3 parts today. So I will have the panelists introduce themselves and have a sense of the immediate now, like the pandemic, how it has maybe affected their work. And then the broader now, the now as in art ecology. So the role and also the status or state of art criticism and curating today. And then finally about the future. How do we imagine art criticism and curating? So let's get to know you all. Charles, Caroline, and Jeff, who wants to start? Why are you here?
Hi, I'm Charles Fong. I'm from Rossi and Rossi. I'm the director at Rossi and Rossi. And really, I'm here because I personally am just interested in criticism. I read a lot about criticism, and I want to engage in it more. And one of the questions I had was, where do I begin? And you know, Yeung and Jeff, they both have run in the art appraisal club, which they actually do a lot of criticism. That's how I met them in the first place, and that's how I began, I guess. So yeah, that's where I got here.
This is a great question. Caroline.
Okay, good morning. I'm Caroline. I'm French independent art writer and curator. I'm also a researcher and art historian. So I guess that my work mixes all these practices. I think they complete each other. They all consist of different possible approach to art. So yeah, so I'm happy to share my experience. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So I'm Jeff, teach art administration and write some exhibition review, but I'm more focused on Hong Kong art and artists. So sometimes, yeah, I think every art practitioner in Hong Kong have many hats, me too, or most of us too. So that's why I'm here saying that we are both critics and curators. And recently I found a new way. I try to be like a docent, a guided tour, because I find it's also funny to be as a both critics and curator at the real time, face-to-face with audience. So recently I'm both critics, curator, and docent.
That's great. I mean, we have great questions already. Where do we begin? And then ways of approaching art, which is already diverse. So let's start with the now, the pandemic. What would you like to say about this condition that we are sharing? What is it to you and how has it affected your work?
I think from a gallery point of view, immediately, of course, it's you know, all the cancellation of the fairs and all those things happen so quickly. We had to really quickly think about how we could still produce content and push it out to our audience. Maybe this is not really about art criticism, but more about how the format should be. And a lot of the work that we are doing in the gallery is figuring out whether or not videos online will work to convey the message we want, or you know, doing online viewing room, is it actually effective, and things like that. So I guess the criticism comes in from that point of view rather than on the art itself at the moment. But I think we're slowly moving away from that because we're figuring out exactly what is the best way for a gallery to to message on the internet. So, you know, things like studio visits with artists, that's very, very popular right now. That's a format that I think that should be continued. Long form interviews is another format as well. So in terms of criticism, that's where my angle comes in, I think, most of the time, yeah, at the moment.
Well, I mean, personally, it's a bit different because I would say that the pandemic did not have any direct impact on my daily routine because I'm writing a lot, so I'm self-confined anyway already. I must say that, of course, I could not organize any shows, could not go on fieldworks, but I must say that the artists, they were also stuck at home, so they were pretty responsive to WhatsApp and online conversations. But I mean, from a broader perspective, I think that the pandemic shows that we need urgently to have more spaces for creativity and for critical thinking. I feel that we need to take some critical distance from, you know, short-term factual pieces of news that tend to flatten and homogenize everything. I feel we need to foster cross-disciplinary perspectives that, you know, to avoid confining issues as they are today into single compartment. Because I think that what the pandemic has shown also is how much politics, culture, health are deeply connected and that we cannot separate them. So I guess that art has a role to play from this perspective. We see more and more artists engaged in research that imply collaboration with scientists, chemists, historians, and so on. And so I think that first it helps because they inject some critical thinking in those fields. And secondly, again, they underline the necessity to have a more like multiple pluridisciplinary approach. So that could be an important thing to underline regarding art. But otherwise, in terms of exhibition, I mean, I don't have answers to these long-term questions that obviously also if we want to learn from the pandemic, like we say we want to travel less, for instance. But what does it mean to travel less for an artist? I mean, globalization has fostered many irreplaceable cultural exchanges between artists from different communities. We can't imagine having no space for these exchanges. So maybe I was thinking it's about maybe doing less exhibition, less exchanging, but when we do them, we are more rooted in the community. As you mentioned, the artist studio, so like we do more like long-term relationships, and because art is alive and it cannot be only online. So.
Oh, yeah, me. I think I'm a bit lucky in this pandemic situation because although I cannot make sure everyone have these difficulties, but I was invited to write more because everyone can sit at home and think, oh, we cannot do that, but we can do this. So I have more chance to write more for the artists, whatever exhibition review or some criticism writings. Yeah, so this is one hand. On the other hand is some invite me to have some classes on net art media. So that means remind us, even now we have to most of the time stick on the online world, but it doesn't mean low art or we are yeah. So I think it's good. I mean, I'm expecting how the situation change our life. So back to the typical terms, the new normal. So I don't know what it will be, but at least I found it remind me to think about art, especially I think some online world related or media art, something like that. So for me, I'm still positive, but of course, try hard to settle the working situation or something. Yeah.
Can I follow up on each of what you said? Like, there's a question of more or less, and there's the question of how. So some of us might be following the routines that we have always been following, but somehow there are also new routines. So and this could branch out into many topics, but I guess as art practitioners, we are all concerned about how the artists show, how to show artists and how the artists show themselves. So I wonder what comments you have on that. Like in your experience, have you seen, for instance, during the pandemic, any good examples of you know, how artists show and how they are being shown? Like for instance, I remember, Charles, you were saying in your gallery, the show of Nicole Wong, that you have shifted a little bit of your practice in how to show her artist statement in a way.
Right.
Can you tell us about?
Oh, that was loud. One of the things you know we did with Nicole's show, we're about to publish her catalog, and in the catalog we have an interview. And when we did the interview and had a transcript out, we were looking at it. We were thinking nobody's gonna read this because it's so long, it's so rambly. You know, you're gonna begin the first few sentences, you're gonna lose interest very, very quickly if you don't understand what the artist is trying to say. So I was thinking, like, how can we actually get people to read this kind of stuff? And I don't know if anybody here know, if you go on YouTube and you maybe listen to a long DJ remix, they usually have timestamps, and they will basically say, oh, this song is at this time, that song is at that time. So we took that form of reading and put it on the interview and basically timestamp every single sentence that we said and have basically a timestamp of sort of a table of contents of what we talked about. And people can just read that table of contents and be like, oh, that's what they talked about. If they're interested in any of the topics inside, then they can jump into the specific parts. That's timestamped. So, I mean, that's something that we've been doing because we know that most people are spending much more time online, and we look at how they're reading the information online, and if we can replicate that onto certain formats that we have in the gallery. It might be sounding very abstract right now, but that's what kind of the work that we're doing. Yeah.
It's not abstract at all. It's like reading like news, right?
Right,
They
exactly,
also
yeah.
give you the timestamp.
Yeah.
Like, if you have 5 more minutes, read, you know, what's below as
exactly,
well.
Exactly. Yeah. I think also there's been a lot of you know, online artist visits and things like that. The first response from the galleries were, let's pump out all the online viewing rooms. That was like the first thing that they've done, right? And they're continuously doing it. But I think the problem with that is a lot of the stuff that's going onto the websites, they basically are buying templates. So they're not designing the website specific for the art. They're not, because they need to get the content out as fast as possible. So they basically will purchase, you know, Art Logic would be the big one. A lot of the galleries are popping onto that platform and utilizing the templates there to present their online viewing rooms, right? I think a proper gallery, if they have given enough time, they should design their own website so that it fits the kind of art that they're showing. Yeah, but that's something that I think maybe further down that will happen eventually. It's just that within the time frame that we have, we want to be able to produce something. That's what it's going to look like. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you are talking about an entirely different experience of connecting with art, which is, I think, what Caroline was talking about just now as well. We are deeply connected. And then how could we imagine us traveling less? I mean, the big issue about supporting artist mobility still very much, you know, unresolved. And then, but on the other hand, we are being tied down by these circumstances. So what is your experience, Caroline? Have you seen any good examples that are able to keep those connections?
Well, I just think it's a good time for art criticism anyway. And as you mentioned, it's a good time to use the online platform. To be creative and to use them more to focus on the artist's processes of work. That's amazing. So we can learn more. We can dig further into art practices and enlarge our views thanks to more contextual input, for example. But I would say that I'm not, I don't like online exhibitions because this is something totally different than the encounter with the artwork. For me, it has to be empirical, it has to be physical. Nothing can replace that. So we can, yeah, again, be super creative and around the artwork, but then nothing would replace that. But yeah, probably just having less exhibitions. And when we do organize exhibition, we invite the artist, and then the artist would stay, and yeah, having much more debates and really going deeper and appreciating these encounters. Because we tend to have like artists coming just for the opening and then flying back, and so maybe we will treasure more this physical presence and use it more to engage the foreign artists with the local community. That could be a solution. I don't know.
The one-on-one. I mean, there are artists who've been doing this as a way of connecting to the audience in a very personal and deeper way, as you said, rather than, you know, mass audience. Yeah.
And not only the audience, the art community, so then we can have also this idea of exchanges again. I mean, this residency program, so mixing all this together for a long-term program.
So for me, quite difficult to say which better the other, but I found this situation is, one point I feel good is I have more chance to not only talk with the artists, but also together to review the past. I mean, in the old, not older, I mean now when our art scene growing, sometimes I was afraid we are growing too fast, work too fast, sometimes overproduce something, we cannot stop to contaminate. Because I think as a curator or critics, we're more concerned not only about the production, about the meaning or any potentials behind the work, behind the production, behind the notions of the artist. So now I more enjoy, more chance to sit down. I mean, everyone sit down in their home, but we can more time to connect, to discuss the past. Because sometimes I think, especially in Hong Kong, we always forget the history, or let's say forget the past, how to reveal or excavate the more meaning or value of the past. So back to our scene, I would enjoy to let's say work or talk with the artists, their past. For example, of course, because for my job, I have to review their work and talk about how they deal again their past portfolio, or based on this, how they project their future. This is one way. The other way is for the last 5 years or 7 years, I find in Hong Kong, media art, internet art is under coverage, not well published. I mean, there are already a lot of media artists in Hong Kong, but not easy to be well published. So I think in the other way, this situation may be good to reintroduce some so-called internet art in general.
I mean, the past, can we pick up on this? Unless if you have questions for each other, just in case. Please feel free to jam in. I mean, let's pick up on the past. What is it that artists concern themselves with these days when you speak with them, like in this pandemic situation and also in general? What is it about the past that they want to go back to?
The practical way may be just a general review on what they did, because I think, sorry that I'm more focused on Hong Kong artists, so my close experience is recent years, they're all busy on making deal, but maybe no chance or opportunities to sit down. So this is a one practical advantage, just look back your own past. But on the other way is, you know, now many artists try to make some work on the Hong Kong histories in the other way, or in short, we would say a very archival practice to find out, or let's say to reveal the other perspective, other aspects of our histories. For example, certainly I forgot the name. 我哋啱啱睇完嗰個係Doreen Chan and also 男嘅People Archives by 人 People's Archive yeah 繼中 yeah and yeah, it is what I'm trying to say, the parts of both personal and our cities.
Yeah, I think it's a global. Global issue, and especially in Asia, post-colonized countries. It's all about reappropriating a history that has been written from a single perspective very often. So it's not always about contesting that history, but like just opening up and again finding new renewed perspective on how to approach history. So there is a long work that has to be done searching archives, and especially in Hong Kong, because this job has not been done yet. But I mean, if you think about it, 97 was yesterday, so it's still a work that has to be done, and obviously it responds very well to the current situation, not only the pandemic, but about the Hong Kong identity. But again, it's quite common. I mean, in Myanmar, they did the same, Vietnam, I mean, Cambodia. It's one very deep process of work, and the artists maybe are well positioned to do that, because it's also about questioning the local institutions. If you want to talk about history from a renewed point of view, you need to be out of this system of knowledge, and to maybe the artists are freer somehow, because also they can use the tools of the historian, but very freely, because they are not constrained by any academic rules or anything. So they are the one who can do that.
It's funny, when you said the past, one of the things that came up in my head was there's a lot of artists using this time moving back into an older form of monetizing themselves, which is patron model. So because Patreon exists and artists can put themselves on Patreon, I've been seeing a lot of artists doing that. I haven't seen a lot of Hong Kong artists doing that, but a lot of the artists in the West have been putting themselves on Patreon and just producing content. And in that case, they're really free because they only answer to their audience, right? They know their audience already is the people that are their patrons, and as long as they keep their patrons happy, then they can keep on living. And I think that's a format that I think maybe more and more artists is going to adopt, actually, because they realize they perhaps don't need a gallery, things like that. I don't know if I should be saying that. Yeah, so that's looking into the past, as you said. Like, I think a lot of artists realize that there is a way online right now for them to survive and for them to make the work that they want to make and actually build a community for themselves. And I think that for a lot of artists is something that's something that they should explore. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
That offers us a great hint, I think, to the second part, because are we talking about a new or a return of an old ecology where there is no need for art criticism or the art critic, the figure of the art critic? That's one question. And then the other one would be all that Jeff and Caroline had just said, and also what you said earlier, Charles, it is the work of an art critic. But then conventionally or conveniently, it is not referred to that way, the work of an art critic, as digging deep and building a long-term relationship with artists, understand their practices, the changes in their practices. So where are we now in terms of where the art critic is and what art criticism is?
I think I always stick on the big issue is what the book's called What Happened in Art Criticism, written by James Atkins. So the big issue is my terms is complaint, that now more is a kind of a descriptive writings or criticism rather than show the writer's judgment or the preference. So in short, it means that now we are not keen to judge or evaluate the work, but just share the comments, share the perspectives. So this is a big issue for me. So, but the reason, I think I will put it more simple that maybe now when we talk about art criticism, it's more tend to a kind of called writing in general, art writing in general, because in a kind of democratic situation or principle, we think that we can have many ways to interpret and enjoy the work. So that's why more channel, more multiple interpretation and understandings on that artwork is more important than the judgment or the final evaluation on that work. So That means that's why I find I write more on the exhibition review rather than artwork review, because I try to find the potential linkage or relevance between artwork as a kind of interpretation or as a kind of perspective on art in general. So, so I would say the situation is now maybe we are more go to the way about art writing rather than which criticism in the traditional definition that it should be more about the judgment. Now maybe more about unfold the potential perspective only.
So you see this as part of democratization of interpretation, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. There is no single way to engage in art criticism anyway. And I mean, although art criticism is only one possible approach to art, it has various forms. Yes,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
if you think of opinion pieces or journalistic reviews, might be very different from academic papers or historical analysis. But I agree with you, it's important to have all these kind of forms. Because then, I mean, we need all these voices to be expressed. It might be a bit confusing for the readers, maybe because we have also a super production of art essay. So how to navigate that might be difficult. But I mean, I think it's also, I mean, art criticism keeps evolving and reinventing itself in order to reflect at best on the art forms it aims at analyzing. I mean, you were talking about judgment, and obviously we are very far from, if you think of Charles Baudelaire's critique in the 19th century in the painting salon, I mean, we can't compare the way we do art criticism today. I guess we tend to focus less on technique also, although that might come back. We focus more on the artist's processes of work. We focus more on the contextual background of the artwork. But it's always situated anyway. I mean, previously we had many art criticism from feminist perspective, for instance. These days we read a lot about how art can express indigenous knowledge. So it's very personal, and I think what is important is to, I mean, from my perspective, is to see art criticism as a process, a thinking in becoming, and it's never about confining the artwork into any fixed category. It's more about, yeah, opening up and creating maybe new, maybe not new, but at least different perspectives from which an artwork can be perceived, felt, understood, but we just try to provide keys that maybe the reader or the viewer can reappropriate and use in his or her own way.
I think James Atkin more try to emphasize the point is once we overgeneralize the principle on democratizations, now the case is everyone, yeah, it's good to present your idea and perspective, but sometimes you cannot if you cannot well articulate your whole process, I mean, the thinking process or the reason, not well articulate your reasons. Every article now is just nothing, just a comment, just the other type of icon of like. So here, I think what he burdened on. So me too, because on one hand, when I talk about the democratization, I have two sides to consider. One, I call it internal. Internal means I, as a writer, how to get the advantage on this good situation. But on the other hand, the external is we still have face to the market, whatever commercial or non-commercial. It means the readers. So what they expect in this way, I mean, in this so-called well-democratized situation, will they really enjoy to read my article, my criticism, not only focus on good and bad, but enjoy or at least follow my articulation to know what I'm trying to say about the art, rather than just in Chinglish, just consume.
But this is about education, then it's about education, right? How, no?
Yes and no. I really do agree, but I think this is not the only necessary point, because nowadays the environment is quite interactive. Of course, we try our best to educate them, but I think nowadays too many things happen. So what I'm trying to say is, even I have a good intentions and statement, but it doesn't mean once I keep saying repeatedly, everything goes well. Even my claim is good. It's more about how they feel about my claim, and then I should call it a response. So I call it now, following to the Web 2.0 now, even art criticism have to be more interactive. So that's why Jury Set is quite popular, because through the Facebook, internet, and even being the TV show MC, something like that. So I think nowadays, that's the point I would try to raise, the interaction on the act of art criticism.
But it's not only about art criticism. I mean, I think this point is about,
right, yeah.
it's about any form of journalism,
So,
and opinion
opinion making the process. You're right.
I want to pick up with something Caroline said. You said that it feels like we may shift back towards talking more about technique. I think that's quite true, because if you see all the YouTube videos that Vogue is making, you know, they ask like famous directors to break down a scene, for example, and this kind of breaking down the scaffold, peeling off the layers, and understanding how a single shot is being created, recreated, and why does it give you that feeling. And I think those kind of discussions are being made online in a lot of places, actually. So it's true, I think, as you said, we're going to move back towards talking about technique, talking about how is a piece of artwork made, for example. And I think as we move towards more digital art, for example, more people will be wanting to know how they are made as well, because then they figure out they're living the environment of this digital world at the same time, and engaging in art in a way so that they understand what they're living. And I think that's perhaps where we could maybe work on.
Yeah, that reminds me of a conversation with an artist. Like recently, he made this really elaborate animation film, which is his first try, and he was telling everyone how, the technique of making fire, like an animated fire, and so he had to follow the laws of physics and all that.
Yeah.
So returning to the technique. I have a question though, like it's all good, it sounds good, democratization, diversity, but then have art forms been evenly represented in writing? Let's put it generally. I mean, Jeff already mentioned about how there is under coverage or under recognition of certain art forms in writing. And I mean, we're talking about who sets the agenda and when and how. So, and we're talking about influences, art criticism as a form of influence. So how do we deal with this, and where are we now? Let's be honest about where we are. I mean, sound, let me put it on the table as well. Not just media, internet art, but I mean, it's coming, but we still need much more interpretations of sonically rich works, which is not necessarily digital. It involves listening and other activities. So what do you think of this?
I guess I'm from the gallery, so I can say this. I do think a lot of the messaging, because the commercial art system has the capacity, the capital to do these things. So they basically take up all the media space. For all sorts of art. So of course the reviews, the stuff that you see is going to be about the stuff that's in these galleries. So if these galleries don't choose to showcase sound art or internet art, for example, then it's really difficult for any critic to be like, oh, I'm just going to write about whatever because that's what I like. Critics have to make money too. They have to write for magazines or write for publications, do shows, curate. And sometimes those will change what you actually want to talk about, right? So I think that is an issue. Maybe all the galleries should pull in some money and just throw it to critics. Would that be something welcoming? Actually,
of course.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
The thing is, I kind of propose this to some people. Some people would be like, oh, but if a critic takes money from a gallery, then where's the integrity? Right?
That's a very old theory.
I know.
As in,
but
you
I
know,
feel like this is a
money
part.
is immoral.
Right. But it's like, well, you can read the thing and discern for yourself whether or not that's honest, right? I think it's up to the audience in that case. So
That's actually a very complex question, though, money and morality. And it's changed so much, that relationship in the West and in this part of the world as well. No, but... Yeah. But seriously, we can talk about this in the last session about future. Like, what if galleries come together or commercial institutions come together and set up a foundation that support art critics or support art criticism, writings?
Yeah, but you still, I mean, personally, I still wish to remain independent. I think it's so much important. And I'm lucky to be a researcher, so when you are a researcher for a university, for instance, you are quite free and you have time, because it's all about time, right? I mean, money, time, it goes together. And if you have time, you can go on fieldwork, you can meet the artists, so maybe you can discover the one that are less exposed. So it's really about, I mean, this is a key, the key work I'm engaged to, and that is part of my practice. Taking the time to discover new artists, new practices, and writing about them if I feel like, or, I mean, organizing show, I won't say that because this is much more complicated to to curate shows, but at least writing about it, yeah. And also it depends, where do you write? So there are different platforms, and again, if you are free and independent, you can choose the one that you feel are more relevant. So, I mean, yeah, this is one way, at least, to try to address this issue.
Sure. It relates, I guess, also to what Charles said, though, about, you know, the patronage sort of system. I mean, the same questions go with the artists as well. How do we remain independent? Is it an imagined kind of independence these days? Or, you know, how do we negotiate that? Very hard. Jeff, do you want to say something about this?
Yeah, but actually I cannot have a concrete response or answer, but it's different level, because I mainly only focus on Hong Kong situation. Frankly, I think Hong Kong, when we talk about art criticism, we are still in a kind of an old style, which means we are talking about writing, not typing. So of course, you all two already mentioned the channel is changing. Because for me, I quite believe the so-called post-human era, but just in a very general popular level, which means really, if money is immoral, I think the coming generation is talking about media, technology is immoral, because the big data will be the new big brother, not the other. So that's why I realize now, even I'm not practice well, but I realize how to well use the medium to present your idea is more important, even artists or as writers. So
can you give an example how you have used it?
I push myself to well use IG and Facebook as a kind of a 150 words art writing channel. That means just use lesser words, but important images. Because I think the other way is about art criticism, not art criticism, is art writing art criticism as a kind of creative response to art. So well-used images and text may be a way, even for art criticism art writers. So I'm push myself to practice well, but still not good, because I'm still old style, still writing rather than typing. Anyway, but I realize this is not a trend, is a must phenomenon, because once you really stick on the Facebook or social media, you realize you're not really talking with a human audience, but the IT system. Because when we talk about, here now I'm talking about how to, let's say, promote or make art criticism more existing. The medium is issues, the publicity, the circulation is issues. But once I talk about circulation in social medias, we are not only tagging with human, but the system. So how to write is not only about the academic concept, is what kind of keywords I should use, so make sure the FB and IG won't drop my article at the rubbish, at the trash. Otherwise, I even cannot archive my stuff. So it seems like a technical terms, but maybe just because my personal approach, I'm quite keen on some principle about medium is the message, and I'm keen on the theory that the medium sometimes influence people's, humans' reaction on the world. So that's why media, for me, is issues.
What do you think of this?
So
Using
that's
the
why, in
medium.
short, not only thinking about make the publications, is talking about the new way to circulate our writings.
Yeah, actually, I'm working on a project of on an online archive about research-based art practices, and so it's also a new thing I'm trying to implement and having to think. Yeah, I realize I think differently, even though the content might be the same. It's how you articulate it. And it's quite challenging, but as you say, we have to...
And for information, our professor in School of Creative Media, Charlotte, already published a book on the art criticism online in a historical perspective, which means review the last, I think, at least 50 years for the last 50 years on the world, some writers how to use online platform as a kind of creative writing, both creative writing and art criticism. So I think just information to show us, yeah, the medium, I think, also important for the art writing and criticism.
Can I, sorry, quickly ask Caroline, can you give us some examples of your observations of this online project that you are working on, like preliminary observations?
Well, it's still a project, so I mean, it's not launched yet. Yeah, I mean, there is a switch of how I might think and approach art criticism, as Jeff was saying. But at the same time, I feel that we need to be aware not to adapt too much also. It's not because we are using more images, for instance, or more video, that we need to be less careful about, I don't know, like the depth of the content, or so there is no compromise. And it's how to navigate in between these two forms that is challenging. But I think it's quite interesting, and the good thing is that we can change, we can amend the content online, and that's, I mean, amazing. It's very, very helpful.
Charles, yes.
I mean, I've been watching, okay, I guess because I'm from the younger generation, I've been watching a lot of criticism stuff that's on YouTube, and they basically would emphasize certain aspects of their criticism with the use of visuals. The video essay format has been really, really popular on YouTube for any kind of film criticism, art criticism, even special effects criticism, stunt criticism. They have those kind of channels where they talk about, but because they're able to show visually exactly what they're talking about, as they're talking about it, it makes it much more compelling to audiences. So they rather watch that, which is slightly more of a passive way of consuming compared to reading a 1,000, 2,000 word essay about a single work. That said, I do think that that video format should be an entry point, right? I mean, that's something that will draw people into reading and digging deeper. And I think that should be the aim of these productions, actually. If we're talking about actually leading, guiding people into what we want them to see and the message that the artist is trying to talk about, or the perspective we're trying to bring. I do think that like having like a kind of a hook almost, like, which is a video format, which is easy to digest, and then use that almost sort of like a net, spread it out there, and then maybe people who are actually interested will eventually get sucked into the art world and want to read more. Maybe that's a way to get more audience for criticism.
It's marketing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from a gallery, right? I mean, this is what the kind of things I think about. Yeah, for me, it's always about the experience the audience have. You know, another thing I think we didn't really touch on is like, what kind of criticism do different type of audience actually consume? You know, there are forms of criticism that's like, for example, specific about technique. And I think if you're speaking to person who's interested in art but is an engineer background, somebody like that will be really interested in how things are put together versus if you study something else, right? So I think depending on the criticism, it is basically, yeah, as you said, it's a key, it's a gateway to allow different types of people to engage with the same thing. Maybe that's how we should see criticism. Yeah.
I mean, again, that's another key to our sort of last part of the talk about the future. I mean, where is the audience? And I just want to, because all of you commented on the changing format, and yet certain bottom lines that should not be shaken up. Can I invite Jeff actually to talk about your cooking, you know, interpretation, conversation sort of project? I don't know even how to call it, but it reminds me of how the format could be lifted from paper or from the screen, but to become personal and interactive.
The one I did, you remember?
The cooking.
Oh,
Maybe.
yeah, I get your point. I just make sure whether anyway, the title is not the issues. Cheat and chat. I just make two past conversations. First, I invite the artists who love cooking, so I invite them to show how they cook, so I can shoot to attract whatever marketing, but also draw audience a new perspective that every artist have their different strengths, not only art making. So based on the cooking demonstration, I can ask them some questions, some general about their art. This is the first part. The second part is only closed-door conversations. I can ask more deep and secret questions to the artist, so the audience can follow up. So that means, in short, I try to make my program favorable to at least two types of audience. One is so-called general audience. The other is the so-called professional audience, which means they have the background. They can ask some in-depth questions. So this is the structure. And then in terms of media, as you can imagine, the first part, I would take the videos for promotion. The second part, closed door. That means we can be more open and have some intimacy connections or conversations. So for me, it's good because I can handle different type of audience, and also I can touch different levels of questions. So this one way. And on top of this, the other way, that's why I mentioned now I'm a docent, because again, I found face-to-face interaction is a new, not new way, but more significant way, even doing the criticism or curating. So that's why, in short, I found docent is the other kind of mini curating for me, maybe just. So yeah, back, I hope already mentioned.
Mini curating. What do you mean?
Mini just
as mini curating.
Mini just in terms of scale, because every docent have to reselect the work in an exhibition to present, or let's say to introduce audience. But if I'm more, if I'm more ambitious through the selection, I can recontextualize the exhibition. So even for me, I would say, an ambitious guided tour docents, he can actually decorate what the curator making through only the conversations and the selection on the place in the exhibition venue. So that's why I quite enjoy recently being a docent, because.
So where are you as a docent?
Why? It's not a promotion at a time, but M+, and occasionally different organization will invite me to have a trial, for example. Yeah, different organization. So for me, it's a kind of fun or creative stuff, whatever. Yeah. But I quite love that because I can practice both, let's say, because I think nowadays when we talk about criticism, it's not only about the one point to one point evaluation, just show my preference. It's a kind of a connection, discussion, because I think we would agree that discussion also important in the practice of criticism. So, but just we're trying to find a most, let's say, suitable or appropriate channel or way to make the discussion more positive or constructive.
We're kind of like three blind mice trying to touch the elephant. Like, that's what criticism is, I think, right? Each of us are blind mice, and we have to basically touch this thing called art try to figure out what it looks like, what it is, and bring that back to the audience. Maybe that's, I guess, a good way of putting what criticism should be like, maybe? I don't know.
I mean, do we know who reads, if it's writing, who reads criticisms and who watches your, performances and who comes to your mini curating?
For me,
Do
I
we
think
know?
I'm, maybe because I'm a kind of a pragmatic guy, that means that each time, for each mission or for each project, I quite understand, or I can locate my major audience, although there's a lot, there's some variation, but based on the structure or the natures of the event, I quite know what my focusing target audience. For example, when I being a docent as a kind of mini curating, I know every time there's only not more than 30 people. They must come from an organization or a social class, let's say. So, but on the other hand, if I do writing, back to the tradition, I really know, because in most cases I can foresee what is the channel I will present. Our books, Hong Kong Art Review, or for the online media, so I can already imagine the basic or the preliminary group. So for me, I think because I'm pragmatic, so I'm positive to work on it.
Caroline, I specifically remember your sharing that very moving story about you said that writing about artists is to write about artists is to distribute their names, to make them visible to people who don't know them. And then you were sharing this with us last week about, the experience of, I think, someone from Myanmar, maybe. It doesn't have to be so specific, but what do you think of, the job or the vocation of the writer who mentions artist names?
Yeah, I think again it's part of like I was saying before. I'm meeting new artists and then trying to expose them a bit more through the writing. But I don't know my readers too, so it's also about, again, the different platforms where I write. This is why I like writing for different kind of magazines and online paper, and really different forms, so that I hope I can reach different kinds of people. But otherwise, yes, we can be seen as intermediate somehow. But yeah, very humbly, I don't know.
And Charles, you mentioned earlier you are from the younger generation and that you do read art criticism, but what do you know about your generation of readers or audience?
I don't want to betray them or anything, say anything that I shouldn't say. I guess really if you look at how much time they spend, man, if Apple is able to aggregate the screen time function and showcase how much time like different generations spend on their phone, and I think we can really quickly figure out exactly how to talk about criticism, because then we can know exactly what kind of channel we should actually be going into to getting into these younger generation, I think. And to my friends, I always tell them, if you want to get into art criticism, just start having opinions about things. I think that's the easiest way, really. But then be able to back it up. That's the most important part. You can have opinions about anything, but in art criticism, really is, I think the philosophy part of it is to be able to back up your arguments really well. And so, I don't know, perhaps we have to talk about it in a way so that practicing art criticism isn't just about art, because once you start doing it, then you start to notice other parts of your life that could be applied to as well. That has helped a lot for me personally. I think criticism, especially like self-criticism, as you start doing it, it helped me personally. And so, yeah, if you view it as a tool, as a skill, I think then maybe people will pick it up generally, rather than just viewing it as, oh, it's just for art. You know what I mean? Yeah, maybe that's a way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's how we look at things.
Yeah.
It's not only about art.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be about art. Yeah.
And as you were saying, it's more than. It's also philosophical. And my favorite essay is Deleuze about Francis Bacon's painting. And it's it's really amazing when you read his essay, because it's never about how I should look at Bacon's painting, but it's really about how we could look at his painting and how we could relate to these paintings. And for me, it's one of the most, impressive art critical essay that really influenced my practice, actually.
So this whole spectrum of what art criticism could be, let's use these last, 5-6 minutes to talk about, the future. Because we did talk about a few things. Just now, commercial galleries coming together and supporting art criticism. Because critics have to be encouraged as well to do well. And then we were talking about why institutions in Hong Kong, for instance, but we don't have to focus only on Hong Kong, don't have art critics in residence, types of programs or other things. What do you think of that?
There was a art critic.
Oh,
sorry. There was an art critic program some time ago. I think Art Map was doing it. I think maybe that's
I guess Oil Street somehow.
Yeah, Oil Street has that as well. Yeah, I remember. But I don't know. I guess maybe starting off as art critics and trying to find a space to write is very, very difficult. Like, where are you going to publish your stuff, right? You can, set up a blog, but who's going to read that if you don't have any fame there, right? So then I guess all those things cause a lot of younger critics to give up a lot of times, probably. What's the point of all this if I can't live, right? For that reason, I thought, if the galleries can just pool money, instead of putting money into like advertising in magazines, sorry, but we could, pull that money into creating catalogs of just critics about the shows that's done within the gallery system in Hong Kong. And I think you have an immediate audience for that, because the people that actually are part of the industry will have to read it, actually, because if they don't, they're not keeping up. Right? I think that's could be the future. I'm projecting a very bright future for the critics, maybe.
No, but I think, again, it's a process also. So when you say that for the young, it's difficult because they don't know where they will publish, maybe it's not what they should focus on. I know it's difficult to say, but it's, when you write, you deconstruct, you verbalize, and this is already something that you reach. So like having this kind of workshop or residency would help. You don't need to produce a piece, but you are, it's a mindset of, using again these tools of verbal writing to go deeper. But otherwise, I think also this issue of space for more art criticism has something to do with public space in Hong Kong in general. So this is maybe a broader topic, because if we lack these spaces, we lack debates in general that won't be organized by any institution, but that maybe might be more spontaneous. And but although there are community-based art projects, I'm thinking of Art Together, for instance. There is a work that is already done on that, but it's a good direction.
Maybe I'm a bit pessimistic, not positive, because I would be more pessimistic, not very positive. I would say, put this way, art criticism in the current social situations not easy to develop, because we have a lot of limitation on expression, freedom of expressions. But the other, this is the fact, but on the other way is why I'm not positive, because I would say that art criticism will fade out and come again, but we may not well identify it again, because it would come in different form. So already we have example, we mentioned medium, social medium, something like that. So that's why, in short, I would say not very positive, but just remind me, it will come again, but in the other way.
That's perfect timing. Unfortunately, we have to stop. We have no more time. We need another symposium. I have a mentor who always asks me by email, what have you been writing? Keep writing. This is like his chant So it's great. It's not just about art. I agree with you so much. So thank you for staying with us for this whole hour. And please stay tuned. There'll be other sessions coming up. Thank you.